councils are legally obliged to do very little, but in fact they have powers to do an awful lot. As such, there's a broad spectrum of activity at parish level. But to be proactive requires not only effort and enthusiasm, but also expertise. In this building behind me, 300 recently elected Devon councillors are being told how it should be done.
You are now a part of the government of the United Kingdom.
Well, joining us with her analysis of what the defence issue will mean to voters is politics reporter Debbie Garrity. Debbie, defence is not exactly the explosive issue it used to be, is it?
No, it used to be the kind of issue that Labour lost elections on back in the 1980s. They supported unilateral disarmament, getting rid of nuclear weapons, and the party was flush with CND supporters, including Tony Blair. And that's a fact that the Conservatives will no doubt play on. They believe perhaps they want to convince us that if Tony Blair becomes Prime Minister, he'll whip out his CND badge and cut defence.
Well, Michael Portillo did say today still that defence jobs will be under threat if either Labour or the Liberal Democrats get into power. We believe him.
Well, I think Labour and the Liberal Democrats will say that's risk coming from a government that's cut 1 in 5 defence jobs in the region.
(1945), Britain under Labour, 17,000 dockers on strike. 1965, Britain under Labour, the leader says never to a Lib-Lab pact.
1995, Brighton under Labour. Has Tony Blair really shaken off all their yesterdays? And can he win in the West Country? These people have little faith in the conventional political process. Many of them aren't even registered to vote, but in some respects they wield more power than the average member of Parliament.
It's unfortunate that the majority of our activities have been criminalised by the Criminal Justice Act, because all we're doing is voicing an opinion. I don't believe that lobbying Parliament with a pen and paper is allowed enough voice. It's not. I've written to Parliament, it gets you nowhere. You get a letter back off an MP secretary that says, "Thank you very much, I like your spelling."
You know, are there going to be more and more accidents then? It just goes on and on.
The trees are all linked with walkways like this, and this ensures an escape route for the protesters for when the security guards come in to clear the site. It also makes it that much more difficult and expensive for the contractors. It also makes an ideal washing line.
I don't see they can be very clean if they've got no water and no toilet facilities.
They need a steam cleaner, give them a wash. That would be the first job you'd have to do, clean them.
Will ye heed their call? The forest they are calling, for they need us. They need us one and all, else they fall. A whisper on the breeze, a sigh among the trees. Rising from their slumber, the people are rising from their slumber, the people are rising from their slumber, the people they are rising from their slumber.
To reconsider that decision to stay down there and ask them to come out, and the sooner the better. They've made their protest, they've got their news coverage, and there's really no reason why they shouldn't now come out. They're just costing money.
The cost will be borne by the Connect consortium, which is building the road. The protesters set out from the start to make the process as expensive and slow as possible. The record for holding out at a roads eviction is 6 days. The tunnellers say they're confident they can beat it. Daniel Bircher for Westcountry Live.
Well, we can cross now live to Fairmile, where we join our political reporter, Debbie Geraghty. Debbie, you've spent a lot of time at Fairmile with the protesters. You must have some sort of idea about how determined they are.
Well, I think over the past 4 days since the eviction started, everyone has had a taste of how determined they are. The danger, of course, for the protesters is that the longer they stay down there, there's a danger that they might lose the support that they have. And, of course, some of the local residents have actually said that to me today.
As was pointed out in the report, they have now made their point, so why are they still holding out?
Well, that's a question that everybody is asking. Every day for the protesters is seen as a victory. They want to draw attention not only to the problems of the environment and whatever, but also to the fact that this is a privately financed road. A private consortium will design, build, finance and operate the road for a period of 30 years. The government, like a mortgage, will effectively pay back in instalments over that period, depending on the number of traffic that uses the road. The protesters claim that this is traffic inducement and will also shift the burden onto future taxpayers, and also the pot down the road 30 years' time for other capital spending projects will be empty. The government say that's absolute nonsense, it's not traffic inducement, and in fact this is a cheaper way to do it.
Well, to highlight this whole issue, which the protesters say has remained mainly hidden, they have issued a set of demands. Is there any chance that their demands will be met?
Well, one local resident said to me that they might as well send a wish list to Santa for all the difference it's going to make. They've called for a public inquiry. There was, in fact, a public inquiry in September 1992, so the government is quite satisfied with that. Admittedly, they didn't discuss the whole issue of private finance, which is what the protesters are trying to highlight. But the other demands, I believe they want not to be arrested. Well, I think the Undersheriff has made it quite clear that he will arrest them. And the other one, which was not quite as... Welcome to Glasgow, Powergame and the big match. Ashdown and Blair, not quite. This is Celtic and Rangers. And the final score from this hard-kicking city of soccer and politics. Don't ask the fans here. Let's wait for the general election.
And tonight, Powergame is right at the heart of the storm. We have two MPs here limbering up for the fight.
So, no peace at Westminster, but nobody here is losing any sleep over that. This is the Italian city of Turin, already gearing up for the critical power struggle of the Intergovernmental Conference. Italy isn't the only country keen to make an impression. Britain has often lagged behind its European partners, feeling threatened by the F word, the federalists who want ever closer union. The post-war pursuit... Another problem on next week's agenda is who, if anyone, should run Europe. Remember a few years ago casting votes in the Euro elections? Well, you'll be forgiven for wondering why, because the Euro MPs haven't been invited to this summit. But the West Country is more likely to cast its eye on an altogether more slippery issue, fishing. Calls to scrap the common fisheries policy are likely to be laughed at. Attempts to reform it, hook, line and sinker, will be equally difficult. From myth to reality, as the Italians prepare to host what many believe could be the big bang for Europe. You haven't heard the last of this summit. At least you saw the first of it here on Powergame. From Turin, for now, ciao. Okay? This isn't a story about your money. It concerns anyone who's ever tried to raise cash for a business project in the West Country. If your idea needs government help, how do you persuade ministers that you're a winner? And who really loses if the government fails to spot someone overplaying their hand? And why is the whole process shrouded in so much secrecy? Has the time come for everyone to finally lay their cards on the table?
FALFAB was formed by two American companies, Portland Medical and Art Shadows, and my concern...
Of course, if it was a crime to throw people out of work, then the jails would be bursting with an altogether different class of criminal. But the victims in this story are real enough, and it's not just those who've lost their jobs. Of course, not everyone can qualify for a government grant. There's never going to be enough money to please everybody. And there's always bound to be a handful of losers and a large number of winners. But there's one case in particular which is causing the government a headache. The strange story of the jobs that could have gone to Cornwall, but instead went to Kent. A case perhaps of the government's left hand not knowing what the right hand was doing. So let's get this straight. We've got people who've lost their jobs and suffered financial hardship as a result. Creditors are owed money because companies have gone bust. We've got Westcountry people claiming they should have got government grants, but for some reason they didn't. And now we've got some very serious allegations that there's more to this bad luck than meets the eye.
Malaysian businessman C. Lip Sim would have preferred his Sinex factory to be in Cornwall.
We tried to bring some jobs there, but it didn't work out and we couldn't find out the reasons.
And you're disappointed about that?
Yes, we are.
This is the registered address of both Portland Medical and Art Shadows. It's just an accountant's office, and neither company seems to have its own premises. The secretary of both is a Mr. Finlay Hilliard. We've spoken to members of his family, including his son, who described FALFAB as a bit of a mess-up. But so far, his father has been unavailable for interview. So, no one here in Louisiana seems able to talk to us about FALFAB. But there is somewhere else we can go to look for answers. Texas.
Almost one of those songs that you feel like you gotta say amen at the end of, right? FM 100.3 KILT, today's country, 12 in a row. This is only Tuesday, but what the heck? I guess there's a philosophical way to look at that. It's another day in our lives. Boy, is that profound or what?
Managing director of FALFAB and the operations manager of Art Shadows is a man called Henry D. Schlesinger Jr. And he's also a senior executive with a firm called Marshall Petroleum, which is actually one of the biggest oil companies in the world. The odds have already been decided by the patient's own lifestyle and by decisions taken at the very highest levels of government.
The odds of this patient surviving have little to do with chance and everything to do with being a winner or loser in a life or death game, a power game. You can always make a case for spending more money on the health service. High-tech gadgets and high-level expectations don't come cheap. But how are we expected to pay for all this? And do the people in charge know what they're doing? So are you a winner or a loser in the great health power game? If the high-tech, high-finance, drug-dependent world of modern medicine leaves you cold, why not try something completely different?
I'm Heather Nicholson, an iridologist and nutritional therapist.
Well, one thing's for certain, there's no alternative to mixing health with politics. Make another appointment to see us next February, and until then, keep taking those Powergame tablets.
So what do you think?
I'll let you know, shall I?
Boom, boom.
Now that's what I call a program.